Have you ever wondered what you are actually buying when you purchase a share of the future?
Right, like when you pull up your portfolio right now.
Exactly. You look at it and you see ticker symbols, daily percentage changes, dividend yields. But underneath that very clean financial interface, a specter is haunting the market today.
And it's not communism this time.
No, definitely not communism. It's the absolute belief that the future belongs entirely to whoever can capitalize it first. So this is Marx and the Machine, a special Brain Candy X Financial Candy series from ClaraNarratio.
And we really saw that specter materialize in real time during our last discussion, didn't we?
Oh, absolutely, with the whole SpaceX debut.
Right, SpaceX, trading under the ticker SPCX, hitting the NASDAQ. I mean, in a matter of hours, it turned into this massive $2 trillion capitalized claim on future surplus.
Yeah, it was wild.
We touched on how a stock price can basically mask the vast social and physical machinery operating underneath it. But today's mission asks a much deeper structural question.
Which is, why does the financial claim behind SPCX sound less like a standard corporate prospectus and much more like a sweeping theory of human history?
Well, that brings us to a showdown between two completely rival theories of history.
Yeah. On one side, you have Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels' 1848 Communist Manifesto, and on the other, you have modern Silicon Valley venture capitalist Marc Andreessen's 2023 The Techno-Optimist Manifesto.
Quite the matchup.
It really is. And before we start comparing mid-19th century revolutionaries to modern tech billionaires, consider this a wry disclaimer. We are not offering investment advice here.
No, definitely not.
And we are certainly not organizing an overthrow of the government. We're really just organizing a bibliography. Honestly, if analyzing Marx's view of capital is dangerous, half the business schools in America are going to need ankle monitors.
That's a very fair point. But, the irony is that to understand why a $2 trillion space company acts as a manifesto today, we first have to strip away a massive misconception about Marx from 1848.
Oh, you mean the whole Luddite thing?
Exactly. There is this pervasive, almost cartoonish assumption that Marx was a Luddite, that he was inherently anti-technology, just, shaking his fist at steam engines.
Like he just wished everyone would return to a pastoral, pre-industrial commune or something.
Right, you hear that all the time. People assume a critique of capitalism is a critique of the machines themselves.
Which is just totally wrong.
It completely misreads the Communist Manifesto. Marx actually viewed capitalism, specifically the bourgeoisie, the class of modern capitalists, as an incredibly powerful, historically revolutionary force.
He was practically in awe of it, right?
He was. He was in awe of its destructive and creative capacity. He explicitly writes that the bourgeoisie cannot exist without constantly revolutionizing the instruments of production.
So it's not just about hoarding money in a vault somewhere.
No, capitalism's defining feature isn't merely the hoarding of wealth. It is the relentless, violent upgrade of how the physical world is made and organized.
So basically, Marx saw capitalism as a forced software update for society's base code.
That is a perfect way to put it.
Like, it isn't a patch you can just click "Remind me tomorrow" on. It forces its way into the system and just rewrites every single social relationship in the process.
Yeah, and that forced update melts away what Marx called all fixed, fast-frozen relations with their train of ancient and venerable prejudices.
Wow, quite a quote.
Right. Capitalism chases markets over the whole surface of the globe. It batters down all walls. It creates these colossal productive forces that would have seemed like absolute magic to feudal societies.
So it actively annihilates traditional worlds to build something completely new and vastly more efficient.
Exactly.
Think about how that exact mechanism played out with SPCX. I mean, legacy aerospace companies were perfectly happy taking their time for decades.
Oh, they were so comfortable.
They completely relied on government cost-plus contracts.
Right. But let's break down how those cost-plus contracts actually function. The government basically told legacy aerospace contractors, we will cover whatever it costs you to build this rocket, plus a guaranteed percentage of profit on top.
Which means the contractor has zero financial incentive to be efficient.
None at all.
If the rocket costs more to build, their guaranteed profit margin yields a higher absolute dollar amount. It basically incentivized throwing multi-million-dollar rocket boosters into the ocean after a single use.
It's wild to think about now.
The old way of doing things was completely entrenched, heavily bureaucratic, and wildly expensive. Then a new breed of capital comes in and says, this is horribly inefficient.
We are going to land the booster on a drone ship in the middle of the ocean and fly it again.
And the legacy players literally laughed at them. But that new capital melted down the old aerospace relations entirely.
And Marx would argue that this is exactly what capital must do.
Hmm?
It acts like a sorcerer that conjures up these gigantic means of production and exchange.
But there's a twist, right?
Yeah, the Marxist plot twist is that this constant technological revolution inevitably leads to crisis. The sorcerer eventually can no longer control the netherworld powers it called up.
So the tech gets too good.
Basically, yeah. The productive forces become too massive, too automated, and too efficient for the narrow private property relations that contain them. That friction between hyper-advanced production and private ownership is what leads to class conflict.
Well, if Marx believes this constant technological revolution ultimately leads to class crisis, the modern Silicon Valley builder believes it is the absolute only moral path forward.
And this is where Marc Andreessen's Techno-Optimist Manifesto enters the ring.
Exactly. If Marx sees the revolutionary machine of capitalism heading for a systemic contradiction, Andreessen sees it heading for the stars.
Andreessen's framework positions growth not just as a financial metric, but as a rigid moral imperative.
Right.
Like technology is the primary lever humanity uses to create absolute abundance.
Right. He argues if we suffered from starvation, we invented the Green Revolution. If we suffered from darkness, we invented the electric grid.
And he says the free market is the most effective way to organize this abundance. He literally calls the market a discovery machine and an evolutionary intelligence.
Yeah, it decentralizes knowledge and prevents the doom loop of central planning. And he brings in some heavy economic math to back this up, specifically citing the economist William Nordhaus.
Right, the Nordhaus statistic.
Yeah.
That is so central to the techno-optimist theology. Let's look at how that math actually works.
So Nordhaus calculated that the creators of technology capture only about 2% of the economic value they actually create. The other 98% flows through to society as social surplus.
2%, that's it.
Yeah. Think about the invention of GPS. The people who built and launched the original satellites captured some value through contracts, sure.
But the global logistics industry, ride-sharing apps, aviation, and even just your personal ability to avoid traffic jams, that generated trillions of dollars in value.
Exactly, and billions of hours in saved time for society. So Andreessen's manifesto frames technological innovation in a free market as inherently philanthropic. By a 50-to-1 ratio, society wins.
Therefore, the people building the technology are the ultimate benefactors of humanity.
But look closely at how that narrative is constructed. Andreessen creates a strict moral binary here.
Oh, very strict.
On one side, you have the heroes, the risk-taking entrepreneurs, the builders, the people bravely forging the future in the face of immense difficulty.
He actually has a section literally titled The Enemy.
He does. It's intense.
In his view, the enemies are stagnation, bureaucrats, pessimism, central planners, and anyone who urges precaution.
He labels people concerned about AI safety or monopoly power as doomers.
He frames anyone who questions the acceleration of the techno-capital machine as a force of demoralization, practically wishing for human suffering and death.
It is a highly effective rhetorical maneuver because it equates questioning the ownership or deployment of technology with hating humanity itself.
Totally. But, despite sounding like they're broadcasting from two completely different political planets, these two manifestos share the exact same structural DNA.
It is really striking when you put the texts side by side. And by the way, ClaraNarratio carries both brain candy for big ideas and financial candy for the market machinery behind the headlines.
And the overlap between these two texts is purely that kind of intellectual candy. Both of these frameworks are fundamentally materialist.
Meaning they believe that physical production, infrastructure, and energy capture are the primary drivers of human society.
Right. It isn't just about debating abstract political ideas. It is about who bends metal, lays fiber optic cable, and launches satellites.
Both of them aggressively celebrate the destruction of old bureaucratic orders. I mean, Marx cheered the end of feudalism because it unlocked productive capacity.
And Andreessen cheers the disruption of legacy industries for the exact same reason.
And both rely on a highly moral, almost religious urgency to describe the arc of history. Just listen to the contrast in their ultimate visions.
Yeah, Marx says, all that is solid melts into air, all that is holy is profaned, as capital forces humanity to face its real conditions.
While Andreessen promises that because of this relentless machine, our descendants will live in the stars.
It's like Marx and Andreessen are staring at the exact same high-performance engine. They both completely agree on its massive horsepower, its ability to move society forward at breakneck speed.
but they violently disagree on who gets to hold the steering wheel.
Yeah, that question of the steering wheel is the real friction here. The tension we are looking at isn't the lazy cable news debate of whether technology is good or bad.
Right, they both agree it is revolutionary.
The tension is about ownership, about the allocation of risk, and ultimately about who actually receives that 98% social surplus.
From a market reality perspective, the builder's argument regarding ownership is incredibly straightforward. The founders and the early investors took massive financial leaps into the complete unknown.
Which is true.
When they set out to build reusable orbital rockets, legacy aerospace experts didn't just doubt them, they openly mocked them in congressional hearings. They said it was a physically impossible waste of capital.
Yeah, they really did.
The builders poured billions of dollars of private money into blowing up prototypes on the launch pad until they figured out the physics. Because they bore that extreme financial and reputational risk when no one else would, they rightfully own the machine.
Right, they own the IP.
They own the intellectual property, they own the launch cadence, and they rightfully own the future cash flows.
That is the compelling narrative of the heroic builder. But the Marxist critique steps in to argue that this narrative fundamentally masks the reality of both labor and infrastructure.
How so?
Marx reminds us that capital is not a personal power, it is a social power. It takes the united action of thousands of workers, metallurgists, software developers, structural engineers, assembly line technicians to actually set that machine in motion.
But I mean, the builder is the one providing the capital to hire those thousands of workers in the first place. Without the initial risk capital, the metallurgists and engineers are just sitting at home.
Sure, but ask yourself at what cost to the balance of societal power? Machines, whether we are talking about reusable rockets, massive low Earth orbit satellite constellations, or data centers powering artificial intelligence, they are not socially neutral if the means of production are entirely privately controlled.
Right.
When you introduce a massively disruptive technology, who gets diluted? Who is surveilled? Who gets automated out of a job?
The human cost.
Exactly. The displaced worker, the de-skilled technician, the local community whose resources are drained, they bear a massive societal risk. But that risk never shows up on the venture capital firm's balance sheet.
Which brings us back to that 98% social surplus argument. If a single company ends up holding a virtual monopoly on low Earth orbit data networks simply because they are the only ones with rockets cheap enough to launch the satellites, does Andreessen's 98% rule really apply?
That is the big question.
Or does the wealth just concentrate faster than ever, locked behind a privately owned toll booth in space?
That is the exact contradiction Marx warned about. Andreessen's model assumes the free market will perpetually distribute the benefits of new efficiencies.
But Marx says otherwise.
Marx argues that when a private entity owns the fundamental infrastructure of a new era, they don't distribute the surplus out of charity. They use it to consolidate their monopoly power, extract rent, and further subjugate labor.
So the technological efficiency is absolutely real, but the ownership structure dictates who actually benefits from it.
Precisely.
And we just watched this theoretical split over who gets to own the future play out in real time on the NASDAQ. Let's look at the hard mechanics of the SPCX debut.
Oh, the numbers are wild.
The company raised a record-breaking $75 billion in primary capital. The stock popped 19% on day one, jumping from the IPO price of $135 to close at $160.95.
Unbelievable.
At its intraday peak, it hit over $176. That pushed the market cap over $2.1 trillion, making it one of the most valuable companies on Earth in a single trading session.
But when you look at the balance sheet behind that valuation, the numbers tell a very strange story.
Exactly. Here is the mechanism-first reality that makes this so wild. SpaceX had $18.7 billion in revenue last year.
Which is impressive top-line growth.
Very impressive. But it took a net loss of $4.9 billion. Look at the other $2 trillion companies. Alphabet, Apple, Nvidia. They are pulling in close to or over $100 billion in annual after-tax profit.
Right. Nvidia is selling the picks and shovels for the AI gold rush and generating massive free cash flow.
Meanwhile, SPCX is bleeding billions of dollars in cash to maintain its launch cadence and build out its Starlink network. So how do you justify a $2 trillion price tag on a company losing that much money?
Because those investors did not buy current profits. They didn't even buy current rockets. They bought a Techno-Optimist Manifesto.
They priced in a worldview.
Yes, they are buying the assumption of total Starlink dominance over global telecommunications. They're buying orbital infrastructure monopolies.
It's the ultimate long game.
They're pricing in the literal optionality of humanity expanding to Mars. They bought the infinite game.
They are pricing in a future state of humanity.
But look at that exact same IPO through a Marxist lens. What did the market actually buy? They bought a highly sophisticated mechanism of state-subsidized private accumulation.
Wait, walk us through how that accumulation works in practice.
Well, consider who funded the gap when the company was on the verge of bankruptcy in its early days. It was massive contracts from NASA and the Department of Defense.
Oh, right, the CO test program.
Right. Programs like NASA's Commercial Orbital Transportation Services, or COTES, provided crucial milestone-based funding. Taxpayer money and public infrastructure essentially underwrote the foundational risk of developing the Falcon 9.
But when the technology finally matured and became wildly profitable in its implications,
The financial upside was cleanly packaged as rogue, independent, entrepreneurial heroism on the NASDAQ. The public takes the early risk, but private capital reaps the $2 trillion reward.
okay, but wait. Calling it merely state-subsidized private accumulation ignores a glaring market reality.
What's that?
Legacy aerospace giants like Boeing and Lockheed Martin had access to the exact same NASA subsidies.
That is true.
In fact, they received billions more in legacy funding and had vastly more institutional advantages, but they used that money to run lobbying operations and build wildly delayed over-budget rockets. The market is pricing SPCX at $2 trillion because SpaceX actually built the thing.
Oh, absolutely. The engineering achievements are undeniable. No one is arguing that the rockets don't land.
So the market isn't just buying a fairy tale subsidized by the state. They are pricing in an execution premium. They are pricing in the cultural promise that the pessimists and the bureaucrats are always wrong.
The anti-doomer premium, you could say.
Exactly. Every time the legacy institution said, you can't land a booster on a barge, or satellite internet will always be a laggy mess, the builder did it anyway. Now Starlink is eating market share globally, and landing rockets is industry standard.
It's a massive track record.
That track record of defying the consensus is exactly why retail investors and massive institutional funds alike were tripping over themselves to get an allocation of those shares at $135.
But notice how effectively that track record of engineering success has been weaponized into an ideological shield.
How do you mean?
Because a company solved the incredibly complex physics problem of landing a rocket, we are asked by the Techno-Optimist Manifesto to assume they have also solved the political and economic problems of who should control the sky.
Right.
The technological victory is used to silence the socioeconomic questions. If you ask about space debris, or astronomical light pollution, or monopolistic pricing power, you are labeled a doomer standing in the way of progress.
It is the ultimate trust the builder, don't ask questions premium.
Exactly. Which brings us to the core takeaway from these dueling manifestos.
Right, tying it all together.
When you look at a $2 trillion valuation for a company that isn't turning a net profit, don't fall for the simplistic trap of asking if technology is good or bad. Technology is a magnificent revolutionary force of human capability.
Both Marx from 1848 and Andreessen from 2023 agree on that.
Completely. But you have to look at the underlying machinery. Look at who controls the production. Look at how the social surplus is actually distributed versus how it is promised.
And who gets called an obstacle to progress when they ask for basic safety or equity.
And most importantly, look at who gets written out of the story entirely while the wealth crystallizes at the very top of the capitalization table.
It really reframes the whole IPO. The market didn't just capitalize a transportation network, it capitalized a specific philosophy of history.
It did.
And it leaves us with one final, very provocative thought to mull over.
What's that?
If both Karl Marx and modern Silicon Valley techno-optimists completely agree that technology will permanently and radically revolutionize how things are produced, what happens to the human labor standing next to the machine once it is fully turned on?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question.
For more brain candy, financial candy, news briefings, and classic audiobooks, visit ClaraNarratio.com.